Good evening, you're watching Left, Right and Centre. I'm Nidhi Razdan. Tonight, Indian industry raises the red flag over the government's move to impose a cess to help fund the Swachh Bharat initiative. Industry says it goes against the government's push to improve the ease of doing business. The 0.5% cess on all taxable services takes effect from Sunday. Is it a necessary step to fund an important scheme, or is it a nuisance that burdens taxpayers even more? We'll be coming to that in just a few minutes from now. But first, let's cross over to my colleague Sunetra Chaudhary, who joins us live from the Wembley Stadium in London this evening, where in a short while from now, Prime Minister Modi will be arriving for what is perhaps the highlight of his visit to the UK. It will be an address to the British Indian community, and perhaps, Sunetra, 60 to 70,000 people are expected to be there tonight.
Nidhi, I can barely hear you, so just take a look over here. Let me just pan and show you exactly the people have started arriving, and even though there's some time left before Prime Minister Modi comes, people have already, the warm-up acts have started playing, and that's what we'll keep live, and it's bound to be a major show. Vijay Chauthawala, who is the organizer, it's days here, it was raining earlier, that must have really worried you.
Absolutely not. We were knowing that people are very enthusiastic. In fact, I myself, when I walked in the rain from the metro.
Even if it rains, you expect people to be here.
People to wear. Absolutely no problem.
Yeah. And it's really loud now, but I spoke to some of the singers who are here, Jay, Sean, and they're talking about some surprise. What is the surprise that people
Well, you will come to know at the end. At the end of
what kind of surprise? Give us some clue.
Miss, of course there is a firework, but there is one additional surprise which you will come to.
Thanks very much. So, everyone over here, apart from the political speech, which is about 45 minutes long, that's towards the end of the show, what they're also saying is that right on top over there, over the pitch, which has the British and the Indian flag, they're going to have a major fireworks display. So, real show planned here at Wembley this evening, and we'll keep tracking that.
Now it's actually going to be, I think, after 9:30, 10 p.m. Indian time, when the Prime Minister will be there. Thanks a lot for joining us. Perhaps the biggest address that the PM will have while talking to the Indian community while traveling abroad. He started that tradition with Madison Square Garden in New York last year. Well, moving on to our big debate tonight about whether India needs a Swachh Bharat Cess. As we mentioned, that cess is going to come into effect from this Sunday, that's the 15th of November. And some of the things that it could affect are the following. For instance, eating out could be a little more expensive now. So will air travel, phone bills, all of these are going to cost more because these already face a service charge. And it is on that this cess is now going to be applicable. The fee for banking services like fund transfers and credit cards will also go up. Processing and payment fees for home, auto and personal loans will also go up, as will insurance and equity schemes that attract a service tax. All of these are now going to cost more. Now it is 0.5%, and what the Finance Ministry says is that this will translate into a tax of 50 paisa only on every 100 rupees worth of taxable services. Now, many people believe it's worth it. Swachh Bharat is an important cause, it's a good cause, and it needs more money, much more money. But on the other hand, there are many who believe this is just an additional burden on the taxpayer. Surjit Bhalla, well-known economist and author, joins us on the program tonight. We also have with us Raghav Chadda from the Aam Aadmi Party, Ajay Kumar, advisor with Sulabh International, and Sambit Patra of the BJP joining us this evening, Rahul Ishwaran, author and activist, joining us from Trivandrum. Dr. Surjit Bhalla, let me ask you first. Just break it down for us. What actually, becomes expensive? From what we've understood, there are quite a few services that now will become a little more expensive. You think it's a good idea in principle at all?
Not in principle, not otherwise either. And it doesn't fit in with the expectation of economic reform. What reforms mean is that it's a very straightforward taxation transaction on the part of the government. If you start, the government already spends about 30% of GDP. So therefore, in order to add an expenditure, there should be some discipline that they can cut some other expenditure. This illusion, who can be against cleanliness, right? You are for cleanliness, I am for cleanliness, the Pope is for cleanliness. So therefore, who can be against climate change or trying to battle climate change? We should have a cess for that also. And who can be against cleaning up the environment and look at the pollution in Delhi? Let's have a cess for that also. So everybody can dream up a cess for every, oh, we have to help the poor. Let's have a cess on that. So this idea that you just put on a cess for anything you want to do is really counter to any idea of economic reform.
So it's interesting when you look at the number of cesses that are, one already is having to pay some bit. Among them, there is an education cess. I believe there's one on clean energy also. There's one on roads. And now you have one on exports, and now you have one on this. Sambit, as Dr. Surjit Bhalla says, this is unnecessary and this isn't the way to go about it. How would you respond?
No, with due respect to Surjit Bhalla ji, he is a well-known economic commentator and columnist. We all respect him. But I would beg to differ by saying that, as was pointed out by Nirmala Sitharaman, that when the nation is in a mission mode, it should not be seen as a burden. I mean, the cess should not be seen as a burden. And as you rightly pointed out, that there is an educational cess, there is a higher educational cess as well. As important as education is cleanliness. And it's not that if we are paying a 0.5% levy on the taxable services, it will be benefited for the people of this country at large. Because if you know, I mean, the health, on the health cards, the amount that this government, that this country is spending is exorbitant, is huge. So if we are clean, if we maintain cleanliness of the nation, it's but natural that we are going to reduce on we are reducing on our health budget as well. So it is absolutely a circle which has to be looked from that point of view.
But Sambit, many would argue, let me take this to Raghav Chadha. Raghav, many would argue that, the Swachh Bharat campaign, for example, already has some more than 3,600 crores that were allotted to it in the union budget. The point is, I think people need to know what's happening with the money and how it's being used, the money that's already been allotted. Okay, I think people might be willing to pay a cess, even this 50 paisa per 100 rupees, as long as they know the money is going somewhere and it's being used properly. Raghav.
Yes, Nidhi, 2 points. Point number 1 on the nature of the levy. Point number 2 on the purpose of the levy. Cess is considered to be a lazy government's tax. It was termed as bad tax by the Direct Tax Code 2009 as well as by the Economic Survey 2014 of this government. It is considered as a bad tax, as a regressive tax, and the maximum incidence of this tax is on the poorest sections of society. Look at what the government is doing. On one hand, they have reduced the direct taxes on corporates by bringing the rate down from 30% to 25%. On the other hand, they are increasing the indirect taxes on the public at large, first by increasing the service tax from 12% to 14% and now imposing a Swachh Bharat cess of 0.5%. Point number 1. Point number 2, or the purpose of the cess. If Swachh Bharat Abhiyan is considered to be an important campaign, pet project of the government of India, pet project of the Prime Minister, it ought to be given priority when it comes to first charge on the main budgetary resources of the government. Sanitation for all, education for all, basic road connectivity, etc. are the principal responsibilities of the government, which ought to be funded by the core budgetary resources of the government. Levying taxes on unrelated activities to fund a particular program particularly shows this government's misplaced public finance priorities as well as the confused tax regime. Now, if you juxtapose this with what the Aam Aadmi Party government did in Delhi, when we presented our first budget in the month of July this year, we did not increase value-added tax on even a single commodity, perhaps for the first time in the history of India. And we displayed our commitment, our priorities by increasing the education budget by a whopping 100% and increasing the healthcare budget by a whopping 50%.
Let me take that back to Sambit.
Nidhi, just let me complete. We used revenue augmentation with the existing sources of inflow of the government.
So Sambit, the point that Raghav is making here is that if Swachh Bharat is such an important initiative, shouldn't it come from the budget and not from cesses and surcharges?
In fact, as far as the technical point is concerned, about the budgetary allocation for the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, there are four modalities through which the budget would be allocated. One is the budgetary allocation, what Raghav was talking about. The second is a cess. It was 2%, mind you, when the initial budget was presented, but it is right now 0.5%, the notification that the government has come up with. The Swachh Bharat Kosh, the fund allocation from the government, and fourthly, by the corporate social responsibility. So all these four modalities would be funding the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. Though I did not want to bring a mission mode to a political squabble that my friend from Aam Aadmi Party is trying to reduce it to right now. But let me also remind him of the fact that they have increased the VAT services on petrol and diesel from 20 to 25% in Delhi. So they cannot say that they have not reduced any kind of taxation in Delhi. As far as Swachh Bharat mode is concerned, Nidhi would agree to the fact that for the first time, mission cleanliness is discussed in this country in an unparalleled attitude. Let me also remind the Aam Aadmi Party that they have spent 536 crore rupees on their self-advertisement. Only 100 crore rupees has been spent on Swachh Bharat advertisements.
No.
So that the
Raghav, I'll give
comparison
you a chance to respond. I'll give you a chance to respond, but let me just get a view from somebody who's working on this whole Swachh Bharat thing on the ground, and that's Ajay Kumar, who's with Sulabh International, who can give us a perspective of whether this money is needed or not. You've seen the situation on the ground. Does it need an additional cess?
Nidhi, we welcome the introduction of 0.5% cess, because right now the position is that 12 crore toilet has to be constructed in India by 2019. So we require 360,000 crore rupee to construct toilets and make India ODF.
360,000
crore. So this 0.5% introduction of 0.5% cess is just minuscule. We require to explore fund from different sources also, like the private donors, like the CSR fund, MPLAD program, MLA fund. Even we can requesting government to introduce the bank loan also.
Okay,
for the construction of the toilets. And this has a very big implication on the health. Without toilet, you cannot have a good health in the family.
No, because the estimates are, Surjit Bhalla, that this cess alone could raise about some 400 crores in the remaining fiscal. Now, you've heard Ajay Kumar of Sulabh International saying that if we want to build these many toilets by 2019, they need 360,000 crores. Now, that's a huge figure. So when you look at it that way, does the cess seem that unreasonable?
Well, look, it's chalk and cheese. First, you talk about, Nirmala Sitharaman said, we've got to be in a mission mode. Can you please tell me what is not in a mission mode on the part of the government? You want a clean environment, you want toilets to be built for all, you want equity to be delivered, you want food for all, you want disease to be get rid of. I mean, what kind of nonsense is this that we are in a mission mode? I grant you, absolutely correct. I also welcomed, along with everybody else, this whole mission of cleaning up the environment, of providing toilets for all. Nobody's against it. But why don't you cut your expenditures? Maybe buy a few less planes. That will do it. Why isn't that in mission mode? So the idea that, listen, I'll put on a cess for anything I dream about, then all taxation is for naught. Remember the same kind of argument was used when the finance minister Jaitley said, we need MAT because that will give us 43,000 crores and that will provide irrigation for all. Listen, and what happened? The MAT was turned out to be a very, very black tax, a very, very bad tax, and the government had to withdraw. So the point is, I can make up arguments. Everybody can make up arguments. We're all intelligent people over here, and we all want a clean India. But the idea is, get that money from somewhere else. There has to be some check and balance on the government, some discipline on the government, rather than anything you dream about just because it's holy, you think that we can put on a cess. I am against the education cess. I am against this cess. I'm against all cesses. Increase the tax rate. Why don't you just increase the tax rate?
You know, it's interesting, and Rahul Ishwar, let me bring you in on this because you're supporting this cess as well. I think Dr. Surjit Bhalla will actually be able to elaborate on this better about just how few people in this country pay taxes. And ultimately, when these cesses are imposed, it is the salaried class that is already paying a lot of taxes and genuinely declaring their income that ends up getting burdened more. And the guys who actually make the crores and crores every year, who don't declare their income, who don't have to pay the cess, who don't have to do anything. Rahul.
Any tax is unpleasant, but we all know no pain, no gain. And if I can borrow from your tagline, cess is a necessary nuisance. We all respect Surjit Bhallaji, but you know, economic reform doesn't mean we abandon the idea of a welfare state. Even though it's out of vogue, we still believe in a socialist state because that's ingrained in our constitution. We know tax is not a pleasant thing, but we have to take care of our poor sections, our weaker section, and ease of doing business also means a more clean or a more hygiene, a more clean atmosphere. Even if you take the dengue cases, 3,500 plus crores we are spending for it. Cleanliness, more hygiene will decrease our burden on health expenditure. So we have to see any new tax on a holistic paradigm. Unless we see them on a holistic paradigm, we tend to cut and break this. On a holistic note, cleanliness is the most important thing, and we shouldn't trivialize the idea of a mission mode. Because millions and crores of people are not having toilet.
Surjit Bhalla wants to come in.
Basic facilities.
Except that Rahul Ishwar, it's the poor and the middle class that end up paying the cess. Not the guys who should be.
What is not being accepted,
Yeah.
what is not being accepted by the commentators is that this is a regressive tax. By regressive is meant that the poor pay a larger fraction than what they should.
Exactly.
That's all. Nobody, you can, you know, we can sing praises to all the good intentions that the government has, that you have, and everybody else has. Why do you want to put on a tax that the poor pay more? Just answer that simple question.
Sambit, answer that. And Sambit, the point is, where is the accountability for how the money that has been allotted in the budget is being spent? You know, that's important. And it's interesting, I think it is the Hindu that did an editorial on how much money comes in, for instance, from the road tax, from the road cess, the education cess, and so on. But people really don't see, you know, it doesn't really match the outcomes. You don't really see how that's being spent in terms of better road infrastructure or improvement in education. So how is this money that's already been allotted being spent? How do we know where this is going?
No, there is
one last
RTI.
point.
One can file
Surjit Bhalla has a quick intervention before we come to you, Sambit.
Yeah,
Yes.
Just one. You know,
Okay, I have not
we
even
have had,
spoken
the
that
country has had a
intervention.
windfall in terms of oil price declines. And all of that has been taxed away by the government. I think that's a very good idea. You know, our prices are down 10% when oil prices are down more than half, have become more than half, or down more than 100%. Take some of the money from there.
Okay,
Who says
Sambit.
don't?
Sambit.
Now, I told you, in fact, Mr. Ajay Kumar pointed out to the humongous amount that is required to construct 12 crore 12 crore lavatories, 12 crore toilets in every home in India. Almost 67% of the country is defecating in the open. Naturally, it's a humongous task. A huge amount is required. And at the very beginning, I told you 4 sources of funding this. It's not that. The cess alone is going to fund the whole thing. There are budgetary allocations which are humongous in nature. We have the corporate social responsibility as well. Then there is Swachh Bharat course. It's not that only this 0.5% cess is going to fetch the whole amount of money of 3 lakh crore rupees by 2019. No. It is just a minuscule part that is going to be funded through this. And secondly, I mean, look, whenever this kind of thing is brought into fore, there are lots of discussion and debate which is healthy and which should take part in democracy. I'm reminded as to how such kind of discussions took place in Singapore. Singapore started the cleanliness drive way back in 1968. And today we see Singapore as a changed city, as a changed
Well,
place.
you've seen the size
I
of
remember in
Singapore.
one of the programs.
And the size of India.
And did they have
Just a-
cesses?
No, it does not mean if Singapore is different from India, it does not mean that India has no right to dream to be clean. India has every right to be
Of course we have a
mission
right
of
to dream to be
cleanliness,
clean.
and
The
I'm
only
sure
objection to the
India
cess
would
is
be able
the
to
demand.
achieve that as well. Don't underestimate that India would not be able to achieve this just because of its huge size.
Raghav, yes, go ahead.
May I? You see, there is a very convenient attempt to shift the narrative and the discourse from levying of a cess to how important the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan is. Sanitation, cleanliness, Swachh Bharat is very important. In fact, the Aam Aadmi Party was the first and the only non-NDA political party to come out in the open and support the initiative of the Prime Minister, and we certainly stand by the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. But the fact is, the fact is that if the government thinks that for every pet project or everything that is considered important, they will levy cesses, surcharges, etc. It's a regressive move, and regressive in the sense that, on one hand, the government is talking about and is proposing a goods and service tax which talks about subsuming all indirect taxes, state levies, value-added tax, duties, cesses, surcharges, and converting it into one tax. And on the other hand, the government right now is imposing more cesses. That's point number one. Point number two, even if the government believes that the only way it can fund such initiatives is by levying more tax, different types of tax on the people with maximum incidence, on a particular section of society, why doesn't the government levy taxes on industries and enterprise that are polluting, that are dirtying the public spaces? And why doesn't the government augment its existing sources of revenue? You spoke of this earlier in the show. Speaking of direct tax collections, there are 125 crore people in India. Only 4.7 crore people pay direct taxes. You need to augment the revenue.
That is what I'm trying to say.
You cannot levy a cess on every project that the government thinks is important.
But, Ajay Kumar, there's an interesting suggestion someone tweeted just now to our show, saying that instead of a cess, why not fine people who litter? Collect those fines, with what money you have, at least implement that properly, show that you're serious about this drive with whatever money you have. Maybe start by getting Delhi in order, the national capital, getting a city like Chandigarh in order, or whatever, and fine people. Is that an option? It's something. It's an alternative.
No, but, you will not be able to collect that much of money which is required for the, making India ODF. What is more important is not only the cleaning of the city, but, people who are defecating in the open. Like if you go outside, people laugh at us. They said, people all defecate in the open. When they,
but where toilets have been constructed, they're still doing it because there needs to be a cultural and a social change to get people to use those toilets.
In the amount which I have stated you, 360,000 crore, that also includes the cost of motivation, education, awareness, follow-up, implementation of the project, everything. So unless and until we educate the people, Mr. Chadha was saying that it's a lot of money and burden on the middle class. But ultimately, if there is a bad health because of the bad sanitation, it is the middle class which suffers.
No, but the point is, Rahul Ishwar, okay, fine. You want to tax somebody for this? Do you think industry should be taxed? Should the tax come from, should there be greater CSR, corporate social responsibility? Is that the answer? Why are the poor and the middle class, why is the middle class being taxed more? I'm just throwing this out there. Sujit Bhalla doesn't agree with me. I'm going to ask him why in a second. I'm just throwing this out there.
The poor are being taxed more, Nidhi.
Yeah, that's the point.
The maximum incidence of this tax will be on the poorest sections of society, not on middle class.
Yeah, Rahul.
The idea of CSR is really good, and if possible, the idea of CSR is very good. I work in a corporate sector. If possible, if there can be suggestions even to slightly increase it, we will be more happy to actively involve in this. But the whole notion of taxes being an unavoidable burden is wrong. The only point is we need to consider it a necessary nuisance. We need to take this in a holistic paradigm. And even though middle class, and even look at the business, look at the middle class, look at the people who are going there, everyone will be benefited by a better, clean environment. And like Ajay Bose earlier said, whenever people from outside come to us, we are a laughing stock. They say our streets, our gullies are all bad. And our PM who comes from very humble beginnings, I'm absolutely sure he thinks for the cause.
Look, it's like Sujit Bhalla says, none of us can disagree with the principle. Sujit Bhalla, the point is, if anyone is paying another tax or another cess or whatever, you want to know how that money is being spent. So how do you ensure that transparency?
Look, we've had this discussion and debate in India about doing things that are considered good. And therefore, we had the PDS system, which is very, very leaky, huge corruption. We've got the Narega, which is huge corruption. The point is, everybody can sit down and come out and say that we completely agree with the principle. Who can disagree with motherhood? Who can disagree with better health for all? Nobody is disagreeing. I am, if you will, very supportive of a clean Bharat. I wish it could happen tomorrow. It won't, but maybe it'll take a couple of years. That's fine. This is a very laudable goal. That's a very big initiative of the government, and we all support it. Now, please get real. Nobody is objecting to the goal. We are objecting to the way of financing it. That's all. So therefore, don't bring in holier-than-thou comments as to how we are laughing stock, etc. We'll remain a laughing stock as long as open defecation is there. That has nothing to do with the opposition to the cess. Please understand.
Sambit, you have the last word then on the last 30 seconds. What about Indian industry, which, you know, has been supportive of the government's efforts on many things, particularly on the question of ease of doing business, which today is saying that this actually negates that? Sambit.
No, in fact, Didhi, this is the right question, and to this let me answer that corporate social responsibility contributes the major chunk into the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, apart from the budgetary allocation. Let's not see the cess as the most important allocatory measure. Secondly, as far as the toilet building exercise in India is concerned, much of it lies with the industrial sector itself. Let's not negate the contribution of industry altogether. Thirdly, if corruption is the case, now the cess is to be started from 15th of November. Why are we saying that corruption is the major case when things have not even rolled out? Let's wait. If there is corruption, we can have a second debate to see as to why checks and balances are not put into place. There are checks and balances. Fourthly, to the Aam Aadmi Party, let's not drag everything to politics, because let me remind you, if you were wary of the cleanliness of Delhi, you would not have spent 536 crores on your individual advertisement. You would have contributed towards the Swachhata of Delhi, which you did not do that.
All right, Raghav, you have only 10 seconds.
Not more than that. Okay, fine. The government needs to understand that they need to cut this political rhetoric and emphasize on the fact that sanitation is about personal dignity and honor, and not about collecting taxes or imposing taxes. It is about influencing and capturing the minds and hearts of people, not capturing their money. And lastly, by making such a regressive step, the government has showed that this government is here for minimum governance and maximum taxation.
No, Nidhi, I did not understand this statement. Sanitation is all about personal dignity and honor. What does he mean to say? 67% of people in India do not have personal dignity and honor.
That Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan is about emphasizing the fact that sanitation is about personal dignity and honor.
I'm out of time. I'm out of time. All I do know is that things are going to get more expensive in just a couple of days from now. There are lots of things that are going to get a little more expensive. We've seen service tax already go up to 14% here, and now there's going to be this additional cess as well. How that's going to play out is anyone's guess at this point. Let's hope there is at least accountability, if nothing else. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us this evening. Walk the Talk is next.